I'm Blanca, 32 years old, and I still remember the exact moment my heart shattered at my sister Emily's wedding. After years of supporting her dreams, I arrived at her perfect day, ready to celebrate, only to discover my designated seat was a metal folding chair tucked beside the restrooms. While distant cousins and new friends enjoyed premium tables with centerpieces, I stood frozen, clutching my purse as the wedding coordinator pointed dismissively toward my special spot. What happened after I quietly walked out changed everything between us forever. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories. Emily and I grew up in the same house, but might as well have lived in different worlds. As sisters with just a 3-year age gap, you'd think we'd be close. But from early childhood, our family dynamic was painfully clear. Emily was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I was just there. Emily had the perfect features, taking after our mother with her bright blue eyes and naturally blonde hair that caught the light perfectly. I took after our father's side with dark hair and what my mother always called plain features. The differences weren't just physical. Emily was outgoing and bubbly, the social butterfly who made friends instantly. I was quieter, more studious, finding my place in books and academics rather than parties. Emily's such a natural performer. My mother would gush during a dance recital where Emily twirled in sparkly costumes. The same enthusiasm never appeared for my academic achievements. When I made honor roll consistently throughout high school, my parents' response was usually, "That's nice, honey," before quickly shifting the conversation back to Emily's latest accomplishment. Despite the unequal treatment, I loved my sister. I was always her biggest supporter, sitting front row at every performance, helping her with homework, and being her confidant when teenage drama struck. I thought that's what older sisters were supposed to do. Give and give without expecting much in return. As we entered adulthood, the pattern continued. My college graduation barely warranted a family dinner, while Emily's graduation from a less prestigious program became a weekend celebration with extended family. I pushed down the hurt, telling myself family dynamics were just complicated. Then Emily met Robert during her final year of college. He came from money, old money with a family name that appeared on buildings around the city. Suddenly, Emily wasn't just the favorite daughter, she was also the one marrying into success. Robert was handsome, well-educated, and genuinely seemed to care for my sister. So, I was happy for her despite the nagging sense that this would widen the gap between us even further. When they got engaged after 18 months of dating, Emily called me first, squealing over the phone about the 3-carat diamond now adorning her finger. I genuinely shared her excitement, pushing aside thoughts of my own struggling love life and modest career achievements. "You'll be part of the wedding, of course," she said during that call. Though she never specifically mentioned me being a bridesmaid, in my naivety, I assumed that as her only sister, my role would be significant. I couldn't have been more wrong. The wedding planning process became a masterclass in subtle exclusion. Emily assembled her bridal party without me choosing college friends, cousins from our mother's side, and even Robert's sister, whom she had only known for a year. When I asked about it, trying to keep my voice casual over brunch, Emily waved her hand dismissively. "I thought you'd be too busy with your work to handle bridesmaid duties," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Besides, you've never been into all that girly stuff anyway." That was the first clear indication that my role in her wedding would be minimal. But I still didn't anticipate just how insignificant I would be made to feel. As the months progressed, Emily transformed from my sweet, if somewhat self-centered sister into someone I barely recognized. Wedding planning brought out a side of her I'd never seen or perhaps had willfully ignored. She became demanding, irritable, and impossibly picky about every detail. "No, Blanca, the invitations need to be cream, not white." "God, do you not understand anything about elegance?" she snapped when I suggested an equally beautiful but less expensive option at the stationery store. Robert's family took control of most wedding decisions, their money financing an increasingly elaborate event. What started as a ceremony for 100 guests ballooned to 300, most of whom were Robert's family connections and business associates. The venue changed from a charming local garden to an exclusive country club where Robert's grandfather held membership. Through it all, I watched my sister become smaller in her own wedding, deferring to her future mother-in-law's opinions and Robert's family traditions. Yet, she never stood up for me or my inclusion. When wedding dress shopping came around, I assumed I'd be invited. Instead, I saw the photos on social media, my mother, two aunts, and all the bridesmaids surrounding Emily in a bridal boutique, champagne glasses in hand. Sorry, it was last minute. Emily texted when I asked why I wasn't included. Well, go to lunch soon to make up for it. Promise. That lunch never happened. As the wedding drew closer, my interactions with Emily became increasingly transactional. Could I pick up the custom napkins? Would I mind calling the florist to confirm the order tasks a wedding planner or bridesmaid would typically handle fell to me, yet without any of the recognition or inclusion. I did it all without complaint, telling myself that maintaining our relationship was worth swallowing my pride. I spent hours making detailed spreadsheets for her gifts, wrote thank you cards she claimed were too time-consuming, and even addressed envelopes when her maid of honor became too busy with her own life to help. "You're the best, Blanca," Emily would say, rarely looking up from her phone as I dropped off completed tasks. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those small crumbs of appreciation kept me going foolishly, believing that, when the wedding day arrived, all my efforts would be acknowledged, that Emily would realize how much I'd contributed and ensure I had a place of honor, even without a bridesmaid title. I spent nearly $2,000 on a dress for the wedding, more than I could reasonably afford on my teaching salary. It was a beautiful dusty blue gown that I thought would complement the wedding colors without competing with the bridal party. I also purchased an expensive crystal picture frame as a gift, along with contributing to the honeymoon fund. These financial strains were significant for me, but worth it, I thought, to show my support for my sister. As the rehearsal dinner approached, I still had no clear understanding of my role in the wedding. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal itself, only the dinner afterward, where I was seated at a table with distant relatives while Emily and our parents sat with Robert's family in the main table. That evening gave me a preview of what was to come, though even then, I couldn't have imagined just how painful the actual wedding day would be. The morning of Emily's wedding arrived, with perfect weather, as if even the universe conspired to give my sister the flawless day she dreamed about. I woke early, a mixture of excitement and anxiety fluttering in my stomach. Despite everything, I was determined to make this day special for Emily, to be the supportive sister I'd always been. I arrived at my parents' house by 700-inch the morning as requested. Emily and her bridesmaids would be getting ready there before heading to the venue. When I entered, the house was already buzzing with activity. Hairstylists and makeup artists had set up stations in the living room. Mimosas were being poured and music played from someone's portable speaker. "Blanca, you're here," my mother said, looking harried. "Good. The garment bags for the bridesmaids' dresses need to be brought up from the basement, and someone needs to pick up the lunch order at 11 o'clock. No greeting, no offer of breakfast or a mimosa, just tasks." I nodded and headed to the basement, listening to the laughter and excited chatter from the living room. All the bridesmaids were there. Some I knew well, like our cousins, Sophia and Vanessa, others I barely recognized from Emily's college days. They sat in their matching silk robes taking selfies and talking about the bachelorette weekend I hadn't been invited to. I spent the next hour steaming wrinkles from bridesmaids' dresses while everyone else got their hair and makeup done. No one had arranged for me to have professional styling, so I would need to do my own later in whatever time I could find. "Hey, could you grab my phone charger?" "From the car?" called Vanessa, barely looking in my direction. I was apparently indistinguishable from the hired help. Around 9, I finally caught a moment with Emily. She sat at our mother's vanity, the makeup artist applying her foundation. "Morning, I said, trying to sound cheerful. "You're going to be a beautiful bride." She met my eyes in the mirror briefly. "Thanks. Did Mom tell you we need someone to help Grandma get ready? She can't manage the buttons on her dress, and none of us have time." "Sure, I can do that," I replied, swallowing my disappointment. "Your hair looks gorgeous. The curls are falling already," she frowned. touching, a perfectly shaped tendril. And I think my eyes look too smoky, I told her. Subtle. I assured her she looked perfect and backed out of the room before my emotions showed on my face. In the kitchen, I found a moment of quiet to text my boyfriend Mark, confirming our plan to meet at the church. His response came immediately. Sorry, babe, emergency at work. Can't make the wedding after. Tell your sister congratulations. I stared at the message, the final piece of my support system crumbling. Mark and I had been dating for 8 months, and while things weren't perfect, I'd been counting on having him by my side today, someone who was there just for me. Now, I'd be completely alone watching my sister's perfect day unfold without anyone to share knowing glances with or hold my hand through the inevitable family comparisons. With a deep breath, I tucked my phone away and continued with my assigned tasks. I drove to my grandmother's assisted living facility, helped her dress in her formal outfit, fixed her hair, and drove her to my parents' house. By the time we returned, the bridal party was in full pre-wedding photo mode, posing in their matching robes in the backyard. Oh, you're back, my mother said when I entered with Grandma. Isle's dress needs to be loaded carefully into the car. Make sure it doesn't wrinkle. I helped Grandma settle in the living room, then went to collect Emily's wedding gown, an elaborate creation of lace and tulle that had cost more than 3 months of my salary. As I carefully carried it downstairs, I overheard 2 of the bridesmaids talking in the kitchen. It's weird that her sister isn't a bridesmaid, right? One said quietly. Not really, replied the other, whom I recognized as Emily's college roommate. Emily said they're not that close. Besides, Blanca's kind of plain next to Emily. The photos look better with all the bridesmaids being more, photogenic. Their words hit like a physical blow. I stood frozen on the stairs, the wedding dress clutched against me, tears threatening to spill. Was that really how Emily saw me? As the plain sister who would ruin her wedding aesthetics, I managed to compose myself before entering the kitchen, acting as if I'd heard nothing as I asked for help carrying the dress to the car. The morning continued in this vein with me, handling practical matters while everyone else celebrated. I drove myself to the venue separately, using the time alone to apply my makeup and give myself a pep talk. The venue was even more spectacular than I'd imagined. The country club's ballroom had been transformed with thousands of white roses and crystal decorations, all bathed in the warm glow of countless candles. The ceremony would take place in the garden overlooking the golf course with white chairs set up in perfect rows and an elaborate floral arch where Emily and Robert would exchange vows. I arrived before the place's bridal party and used the time to check that my grandmother's special needs were accommodated with an aisle seat. I straightened Emily's train multiple times before she walked down the aisle, fixed a loose curl in her hair, and even loaned the best man a pen to sign the marriage license when the official one disappeared. All the while, I remained in the background, unacknowledged in the wedding program or by the officiant when he thanked the family. Just before the ceremony began, Emily turned to me, a rare moment of the sister I remembered. I'm so nervous, she whispered, squeezing my hand. You look absolutely beautiful, I told her sincerely. Robert won't know what hit him. For a brief moment, she hugged me tightly. Thank you for everything, Blanca. That moment gave me hope that, despite everything, our bond as sisters still meant something. I held on to that, feeling as I took my seat for the ceremony alone, but optimistic that the reception would finally give me a chance to truly celebrate with my sister and family. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The ceremony was undeniably beautiful. Emily floated down the aisle, on our father's arm, looking like she'd stepped out of a bridal magazine. The garden setting was perfect with late afternoon sunlight filtering through the trees and casting a golden glow over everything. When Robert saw Emily, his face transformed with genuine love and awe, bringing tears to my eyes. Whatever tensions existed in our family, this union seemed pure and real. I sat in the 4th row, not with immediate family, but not completely banished either. Throughout the ceremony, I focused on the joy of the moment rather than my own hurt feelings. The vows were personal and heartfelt, and I felt a surge of happiness for my sister when they were pronounced husband and wife. After the ceremony, guests mingled during cocktail hour while the wedding party took photos. I helped my grandmother navigate the crowded terrace, fetched drinks for elderly relatives, and straightened Emily's train again for pictures. Though the photographer never asked me to join any family shots, I told myself it was fine, that the formal portraits needed to be streamlined, and there would be plenty of casual photos later. As cocktail hour wound down, staff began directing guests toward the ballroom for the reception. Everyone pulled out envelopes containing their table assignments, but I hadn't received one. Assuming mine had been overlooked in the busy preparation, I approached the welcome table where a wedding planner stood checking names. "Excuse me, I didn't receive my seating card. I'm Blanca, the bride's sister." The planner's eyes flickered with recognition, but not the respectful kind I expected as an immediate family member. "Right," she said, checking her tablet. "You're at," she hesitated, frowning slightly. "Let me show you." Rather than simply telling me a table number, she led me into the ballroom, where round tables covered in white linen surrounded a wooden dance floor. Each table featured elaborate centerpieces of white roses and crystal candelabras, with gold-rimmed china and sparkling glacier at each place setting. The planner led me past all these beautiful tables toward the back of the room. "Here you are," she said, gesturing to a single metal folding chair positioned against the wall, directly beside the restroom doors. I stared at the chair in disbelief. Unlike the elegant Qari chairs at the dining tables, this was clearly a last-minute addition. A basic metal folding chair, with no cushion or decoration. There was no place setting, no access to a table for eating. "There must be a mistake," I said, my voice barely audible over the growing noise of entering guests. The planner's expression held a hint of discomfort, but her tone remained professional. "No mistake. The seating chart was finalized by the bride yesterday." She pointed to a large display near the entrance, an elegant mirror with table assignments written in calligraphy. In a daze, I walked to the seating chart and scanned for my name. There it was in smaller writing than the rest at the very bottom: Blanca restroom chair. The words were there in elegant script, confirming this wasn't some staff error, but a deliberate decision. My sister had specifically assigned me, her only sibling, to sit alone by the bathrooms. Around me, guests were finding their assigned tables, exclaiming over the beautiful centerpieces, and taking photos. I recognized distant cousins we saw only at holidays seated at prime tables near the front. My parents' neighbors, who'd known us since childhood, had better seats than me. Even Robert's former college roommate, whom Emily had met only twice, had a place at a table with other friends. In a state of shock, I approached my parents, who were greeting guests at the head table. "Mom," I said quietly, trying to keep my composure, "there seems to be a problem with my seating. I'm assigned a chair by the bathrooms." My mother glanced toward the chair in question, then back at me. Her expression showed brief concern before hardening into the familiar look I'd seen throughout my childhood whenever I questioned Emily's preferential treatment. "The tables were very tight. With the final head count," she said dismissively, "your father and I didn't handle the seating arrangements. That was Emily and Robert's decision." "Please don't make a fuss, Blanca. This is your sister's special day." "But I'm sitting by the bathroom," I repeated, my voice cracking slightly. "Alone on a metal chair. At least you have a seat," my father interjected, attempting humor. "Some weddings people stand the whole time." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. Guests were starting to stare, probably wondering why the bride's sister was causing a scene. I could feel their curious gazes, some pitying, others judgmental. "Fine," I said, quietly retreating before I lost my composure entirely. I made my way back to the assigned chair, each step feeling heavier than the last. The metal was cold through the fabric of my expensive dress as I sat down, attempting to appear dignified despite my exception. Humiliating position. From this vantage point, I could see the entire reception, but was apart from it, an observer rather than a participant. Within minutes, the consequences of my seating became clear. As guests began using the restrooms, they had to squeeze past me, often bumping my chair or murmuring awkward apologies. The constant opening and closing of the bathroom doors created an unpleasant draft, and occasional wafts of bathroom smells reached me whenever someone exited. When dinner service began, waiters circulated with plates for the seated guests. They passed me, repeatedly unsure if I was supposed to be served. Eventually, I had to flag someone down to ask for food, explaining that yes, I was actually a wedding guest, despite my unusual seating. "Oh, I'm sorry," said the waiter, looking genuinely embarrassed. "I thought you might be waiting for someone." When he returned with my plate, there was nowhere to set it except my lap, making eating an awkward balancing act. No one offered me champagne for the toasts. I had to stand to see over guests during the speeches and first dance. Throughout it all, I maintained my composure, though tears threatened constantly. I caught snippets of conversation from passing guests, some expressing confusion about my situation. "Is that the bride's sister?" whispered one older woman to her companion. "Why on earth is she sitting there? Maybe she came late," replied the other. Though you'd think they'd make space for immediate family, the worst moment came when a distant relative's child, about 7 years old, stopped directly in front of me while waiting for the bathroom. "Are you the bathroom lady?" he asked innocently. "My mom said to give $1 to the bathroom attendant, but I only have quarters." His mother quickly pulled him away, mortified, but the damage was done. Several nearby guests had overheard, and I saw pitying glances cast in my direction. Emily floated through the reception in her perfect dress, greeting guests and dancing with Robert, seemingly oblivious to my situation. I tried multiple times to speak with her, but she was constantly surrounded by photographers, family members, or friends. The one time I managed to approach her, she barely looked at me. "Emily, could I talk to you for a second about my seating?" I asked quietly. "Not now, Blanca," she said, eyes scanning the room for more important guests. "Just sit where you're told. Don't make a scene." As I retreated to my bathroom chair, I noticed Robert's mother watching the interaction, a slight frown on her face. Throughout the evening, I'd caught members of Robert's family glancing at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to what seemed like disdain. Did they know who I was? Did they wonder why the bride's sister was being treated this way? Or had Emily told them some story to explain my exclusion? One of Emily's college roommates, Jessica, approached me during a lull in the music. Her eyes were full of pity, which somehow made everything worse. "Hey," she said awkwardly, hovering beside my chair. "It's really crowded in here, huh?" "They probably ran out of table space." "Probably," I replied, forcing a smile. "Well, if you want, you can come stand by our table during the cake cutting," she offered as if conferring a great favor. "Thanks. I can see fine from here," I said, my pride the only thing I had left to hold on to. As Jessica walked away, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror inside the bathroom as someone exited. My carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the hurt in my eyes, the slight tremble in my lips as I fought to maintain my dignity. In that moment, our memories flooded back, scene after scene from our childhood. Emily center stage, at the piano recital, while I turned pages for other students. Emily blowing out birthday candles while I served cake to guests. Emily receiving lavish praise for middle school art projects while my academic awards went unnoticed. I'd spent my entire life in the shadows, telling myself it was temporary, that eventually my parents would see me, my sister would value me, my contributions would be acknowledged. Yet here I was, 32 years old, still the afterthought, still the one who could be placed by the bathroom without a second thought. My mother passed by deep in conversation with Robert's aunt. When she noticed me, she paused briefly. "Blanca, you're looking so serious. Smile. It's a wedding," she said before continuing on without waiting for a response. That casual dismissal of my obvious distress was the final confirmation of what I'd always known, but tried to deny in my family's eyes. My feelings simply didn't matter. I was expected to smile and support and give endlessly without ever expecting reciprocation or even basic consideration. As I sat there in my dusty blue dress that had cost more than I could afford, watching everyone else enjoy the celebration from proper seats, at beautifully decorated tables, something inside me finally broke. The breaking point came during the toasts. After Robert's best man delivered a heartfelt speech about friendship and love, the microphone was passed to Emily. She stood radiant in her wedding gown, champagne flute in hand, ready to thank those who had made her day special. "I want to take a moment to thank everyone who truly matters to us," She began, her eyes scanning the crowd. Our amazing parents who gave us this beautiful wedding, Robert's family who welcomed me with open arms. My incredible bridesmaids who've been by my side through everything, she continued, listing people. Robert's grandmother who traveled from Florida, her dance teacher, who came despite recent surgery. Even the wedding planner received specific mention. As the list went on, the omission became increasingly obvious. Not once did she mention her only sister, the person who had spent months helping with wedding preparations, who had supported her throughout her entire life. It wasn't an oversight. When she concluded with, "Everyone here has played such an important role in our lives, and we're so grateful you could share this day with us." Her eyes briefly flickered toward my corner before quickly moving away. She knew exactly what she was doing. The pain that shot through me was physical, a crushing sensation in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. I sat perfectly still, hands clutched tightly in my lap, as applause erupted around me. A woman exiting the bathroom bumped my chair, murmuring a distracted, "Sorry," without really seeing me, a perfect metaphor for my entire existence in my family. As dinner service concluded and dancing began in earnest, I found myself effectively trapped in my corner. The DJ played upbeat songs that filled the dance floor with enthusiastic guests, all seemingly having the time of their lives. From my vantage point, I could see everything. My parents dancing together, looking prouder than I'd ever seen them. Emily and Robert surrounded by friends in a joyful circle. Even my grandmother being twirled gently by an elderly uncle. Everyone belonged except me. A server approached one who had noticed my predicament earlier and had been kind enough to bring me water. Without being asked, "Would you like some cake, miss?" he asked quietly. "I can bring you a slice before they serve the rest of the guests." His kindness, this small acknowledgement of my humanity from a complete stranger, nearly undid me. I thanked him but declined, no longer able to swallow past the lump in my throat. As the evening wore on, the bathroom traffic increased, with guests coming and going more frequently after drinks and dancing. Each time someone passed, I had to tuck my feet in and shift my chair, sometimes standing completely to allow space for multiple people to pass. My presence became a subject of curiosity and gossip. "Who's that by the bathroom?" I overheard one of Robert's relatives ask another. "I think it's the bride's sister," came the response. "Not sure why. She's sitting there. Family drama, maybe." "Must be," agreed the first, both glancing at me with undisguised curiosity. The bride seemed so sweet, though. Hard to imagine her putting a family by the restroom without good reason. Their words twisted the knife deeper. Even strangers assumed I must have done something terrible to deserve such treatment. The narrative was already forming. Sweet Emily and the difficult Blanca, the sister who couldn't even be seated with real guests. I checked my phone, desperate for distraction, and found a text from Mark. "How's the wedding? Is it as bad as you feared?" His casual question after canceling on me last minute felt like one more betrayal in a day full of them. While scrolling mindlessly through social media to avoid making eye contact with passing guests, I noticed a bridesmaid, Jennifer, posting photos from the wedding in real time. One caption read, "The most perfect day for the most perfect couple number, Emily and Robert, forever." The photo showed Emily surrounded by bridesmaids, all laughing joyfully. These were women she'd known for a fraction of the time she'd known me, yet they were integral to her day while I was literally positioned next to garbage. A particularly loud burst of laughter drew my attention to a table near the dance floor where my cousins Sophia and Vanessa sat with other bridesmaids. They were looking in my direction and quickly averted their gaze when I caught them, their expressions a mixture of embarrassment and amusement. Were they laughing at me? The paranoia that had been building all evening crescendoed, making me feel like a spectacle, the sad sister on display for everyone's entertainment. I needed air. Standing abruptly, I made my way toward a side door that led to an outdoor terrace, desperate for a moment of privacy to collect myself. As I passed the head table, I heard my mother's voice. "Blanca, where are you going?" "They're about to cut the cake." I paused, turning to face her. "I just need some fresh air, Mom." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're not upset about the seating, are you?" We explained there were limitations with the final numbers. Limitations that somehow didn't affect distant cousins or Robert's former roommates. I replied, unable to keep the hurt from my voice. "You're overreacting as usual," she said dismissively. "It's Emily's day. Not everything is about you." Those words, so familiar throughout my life, hit differently this time. Nothing had ever been about me, not once. Every milestone, every achievement, every need I'd ever had been secondary to Emily's desires. "When has anything ever been about me?" I asked quietly, not really expecting an answer. My mother's expression hardened. "This is not the time or place for one of your episodes, Blanca. Pull yourself together and act like an adult." An episode, that's what she called it. Whenever I expressed hurt or disappointment about my treatment, as if having feelings was a character flaw, a weakness to be overcome rather than a natural human. In response to continual dismissal, I stepped onto the terrace, gulping the cool evening air. The garden lights illuminated the carefully manicured grounds, creating a magical setting that contrasted sharply with the ugliness I felt inside. I leaned against the stone balustrade, finally allowing the tears I'd been holding back all day to fall. Behind me, the door opened again. I quickly wiped my face, expecting my mother coming to deliver another lecture about composure and family obligation. Instead, it was Jennifer, the bridesmaid, who'd been posting photos online. She approached cautiously, as if I might shatter. "Hey," she said, tentatively, "are you okay?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "I'm fine," I lied, automatically. The response ingrained after years of hiding my feelings. Jennifer looked uncomfortable but determined. "Look, I know it's not my place, but that chair by the bathroom, that's really messed up. I asked Emily about it, and she just said something about table counts not working out, but there's plenty of room at our table." The confirmation that my seating was a deliberate choice rather than an oversight landed like a physical blow. "It is what it is," I said, summoning. It was the last of my dignity. "I'm used to being an afterthought." "But you're her sister," Jennifer insisted, genuinely confused. "I have a sister, and I can't imagine treating her like that, especially at my wedding." Her words, intended as supportive, only highlighted how abnormal my family dynamic truly was. In normal families, sisters were valued. In normal families, you didn't put immediate family by the bathroom, while virtual strangers enjoyed prime seating. "Emily and I have a complicated relationship," I said. Finally, the understatement of the century. Jennifer seemed about to say more when the DJ's voice boomed through the open door, announcing the cake cutting was about to begin. She glanced back toward the ballroom, clearly torn between staying with me and returning to her bridesmaid duties. "You should go," I told her. "Don't miss the cake cutting." With a sympathetic smile and a squeeze of my arm, Jennifer returned inside, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the weight of decades of accumulated hurt. In that moment of solitude, watching the celebration continue through the windows without me, I finally confronted the truth I'd been avoiding for years. This pattern would never change unless I changed it. No amount of support, love, or self-sacrifice on my part would ever result in reciprocal respect or consideration from my family. They hadn't shown me in the clearest possible way exactly where I stood in their hierarchy of importance. I couldn't change how they saw me or treated me, but I could change how I responded to it. Standing alone on that terrace, watching the celebration through glass walls, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity, the kind that only comes when pain cuts through years of self-deception and forces you to see reality exactly as it is. My entire life had been shaped by a desperate need for approval from people who were constitutionally incapable of giving it to me. I had defined my worth through their eyes, constantly trying to earn love that should have been freely given. And where had it led me? To a metal folding chair beside a bathroom, excluded from my own sister's celebration while maintaining a painful smile. For the first time, I didn't feel the usual rush of guilt for having negative thoughts about my family. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar: anger. Not the fleeting irritation I'd allowed myself in small doses throughout my life, but deep righteous anger at how I'd been treated. Anger at me parents, for their blatant favoritism, at Emily, for her casual cruelty, and mostly at myself for accepting it all for so long. This wasn't just about a chair or a wedding. This was about 32 years of being treated as less than, of having my feelings dismissed, as overreactions, of giving endlessly while receiving scraps. In return, I took a deep breath, straightened my spine, and made a decision. I wouldn't cause a scene or confront anyone. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of labeling me as dramatic or difficult. I would simply leave quietly and with dignity. I would choose myself, perhaps for the first time in my life. Before leaving, though, I wanted Emily to understand why, not to hurt her or ruin her day, but because true relationships require honesty, even when it's painful. I returned briefly to the bathroom chair to retrieve my purse, then found a quiet corner in the venue's lobby. Using the hotel stationery and pen from the front desk, I wrote a note. Emily, congratulations on your wedding. The ceremony was beautiful, and I'm genuinely happy you found someone who loves you. I'm writing this note to explain why I've left early. When I discovered my assigned seat was a folding chair by the bathroom, while even distant acquaintances enjoyed proper table seating, I realized something important. How people treat you shows you how they value you. Today made it painfully clear where I stand in your life. This isn't about a chair. It's about years of being treated as an afterthought in our family. I've always supported you, celebrated you, and been there whenever you needed me. I deserved better today, and I deserve better going forward. I hope someday you'll understand why I needed to leave. I wish you and Robert happiness in your marriage. Love, Blanca. I folded the note and wrote Emily's name on the outside. After a moment's consideration, I approached one of the waitstaff, pressed a $20 bill into his hand, and asked him to deliver the note to the bride in about an hour, not immediately. I didn't want to disrupt the cake cutting or other important moments. As I gathered my wrap and prepared to leave, Jennifer spotted me from across the lobby. She quickly made her way over, concern evident on her face. "You're leaving?" she asked, taking in my purse and wrap. I nodded beyond pretense at this point. "I think it's best." Because of the seating, she pressed, lowering her voice, though no one was nearby to overhear. Because I finally realized I deserve better than a bathroom chair at my own sister's wedding, I replied honestly. Jennifer's expression shifted from concern to shock. "Wait, that was deliberate. I thought maybe it was a last-minute thing because you're +1 candled or something." "No," I said quietly. "My name was specifically written on the seating chart as bathroom chair. Emily and my parents knew exactly where I was sitting all evening." Jennifer seemed at a loss for words, genuinely appalled. "That's horrible. Why would she do that to her own sister?" I shrugged, too emotionally exhausted to analyze Emily's motivations. Our family dynamic has always been unbalanced. This was just the clearest demonstration of it. Jennifer hesitated, then asked, "Do you want me to tell her you left or why?" "I left her a note," I explained. "But I'd appreciate if you didn't mention seeing me leave. I'd rather avoid being labeled as dramatic for quietly removing myself from a situation where I was being disrespected." Jennifer nodded, then surprised me by giving me a quick hug. "For what it's worth, I think you seem like a really good person. Emily's lucky to have you as a sister, even if she doesn't realize it." Her kindness from someone who was essentially a stranger brought fresh tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I managed. "That means a lot." We parted ways and I timed my exit to coincide with the father-daughter dance when all attention would be focused on the dance floor. As the opening notes of Butterfly Kisses filled the ballroom, I slipped out the main doors and into the cool night air. The valet brought my car, and as I drove away from the country club, a strange mixture of emotions washed over me. There was grief, certainly for the relationship I'd always wanted, but never truly had. There was fear about the inevitable fallout and accusations of selfishness that would follow. But predominant among these feelings was something unexpected: relief. Relief at finally acknowledging the truth instead of maintaining the painful pretense that had defined our family dynamic for decades. The drive home was almost surreal. While Emily danced and celebrated, surrounded by people who ostensibly valued her, I navigated dark roads alone, tears occasionally blurring my vision. But with each mile that separated me from that bathroom chair, I felt something shift inside me, a weightlifting that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone had already begun buzzing with notifications, text messages from my mother. "Where are you? The photographer wants family photos." Then 30 minutes later, "This is incredibly selfish. Blanca, your sister is asking for you." From my father. Your mother is upset. Call immediately. I silenced the phone. Without responding and changed out of my expensive dress, hanging it carefully, though I doubted I'd ever wear it again. The physical reminders of the day, the dress, the professional makeup now stray, with tears, the elegant updo now falling loose, all seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. I made a cup of tea and sat by my apartment window, watching the city lights and allowing myself to really feel the full range of emotions I'd suppressed for so long. There was sadness, yes, but also clarity, and beneath it all, a tentative sense of liberation. For once, I'd chosen my own well-being over the endless cycle of giving without receiving. Around midnight, my phone began ringing incessantly. Emily's name flashed on the screen, call after call that I let go to voicemail. Then text messages started, coming in rapid succession. Where did you go? Everyone's asking where you are. Jennifer told everyone about the bathroom chair. How could you do this to me on my wedding day? Call me back right now. That last message revealed so much. Even now, her primary concern was how my absence affected her, not why I might have felt the need to leave in the first place. I turned off my phone completely and went to bed emotionally exhausted, but strangely peaceful. Tomorrow would bring confrontations and accusations, but for tonight, I'd given myself permission to prioritize my own emotional well-being. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized something profound. Walking away from that chair, from that position of literal marginalization, was the first step toward walking away from the emotional marginalization I'd accepted my entire life. It wasn't just about leaving a wedding. It was about leaving behind a dynamic that had diminished me for as long as I could. Remember, I fell asleep wondering what would happen next, knowing only that whatever came, I would face it. As someone who had finally recognized her own worth, I woke the next morning to insistent knocking at my apartment door. Blurry-eyed and still emotionally drained, I checked the peephole and froze in disbelief. Emily stood in the hallway, still wearing her wedding dress, mascara streaked down her cheeks, looking nothing like the radiant bride of yesterday. For a moment, I considered not answering, needing more time to process my own feelings before confronting hers. But the knocking continued, and my neighbors would soon to be disturbed. With a deep breath, I opened the door. "What are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You should be at the hotel with Robert. Don't you leave for your honeymoon today?" Emily pushed past me into the apartment, the voluminous skirt of her once perfect gown, now crumpled and stained at the hem. She whirled to face me, eyes red from crying. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "How could you just leave like that and ruin everything?" I closed the door, quietly, determined to maintain my composure, despite her obvious distress. I left a note explaining why. "Did you read it?" "Of course, I read it," she snapped. "Your ridiculous note about a chair. Do you have any idea what happened after you left?" I shook my head, genuinely unaware of what could have transpired, to bring my sister to my doorstep in her wedding gown the morning after her wedding. Emily collapsed onto my couch. The wedding dress poofing around her like deflating meringue. It was a complete disaster. Jennifer announced to everyone at her table why you left. She stood up and actually said, "The bride just left," because they made her sit on a folding chair by the bathroom. People started whispering, looking at me like I was some kind of monster. I hadn't expected Jennifer to make my departure public knowledge. I'd assumed my absence would be noted only by immediate family, perhaps explained away with a convenient excuse. Robert's mother cornered me. Emily continued, tears flowing freely now. She asked if it was true, and when I couldn't deny it, she gave me this look of disgust. My own mother-in-law, disgusted with me on my wedding day. "I'm sorry that happened," I said quietly, meaning it despite everything. "I never intended for my leaving to become public knowledge." "Then you shouldn't have left," Emily cried, anger flashing through her tears. "You should have just stayed in your seat and not made a scene." "The scene wasn't me leaving quietly," I pointed out. "The scene was my sister putting me on a folding chair by the bathroom while distant relatives got proper seating. That was the scene, Emily." My calm response seemed to deflate her somewhat. She looked down at her hands, twisting her new wedding ring. "You don't understand," she said, softer now. "The seating was complicated. Robert's mother insisted we invite all these family friends. The tables were fixed at 10 people each. Someone had to take the overflow spot. And that someone had to be your only sister? I asked. Not a distant cousin or a plus one you barely knew. It had to be me. Emily was silent for a long moment, unable to meet my eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I thought you wouldn't mind. You never complain about anything. The simplicity of her explanation stunned me. In her world, my lifetime of accommodating, of swallowing hurt to keep peace, had transformed me into someone whose feelings didn't need consideration. My consistent support had been interpreted as a lack of personal needs rather than an act of love. What happened after? Jennifer announced why I left? I asked, steering us back to the immediate situation. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Everything changed. People started looking at me differently, Robert's grandmother asked. Him, if this was how my family always treated each other. The best man's toast referenced it, saying something about hoping Robert wasn't getting into a family that doesn't value siblings. It was humiliating. I can imagine, I said, genuinely sympathetic despite everything. That sounds painful. Mom and Dad were furious, she continued. They blamed me for not handling the seating better. They said, I should have found you a proper place. As if they hadn't seen exactly where you were sitting all night and said nothing. This revelation wasn't surprising, but still hurt. Of course, our parents would distance themselves from the decision once it became publicly embarrassing. After you left, Robert kept asking questions, Emily said, her voice dropping further about how we grew up, about why I would seat my only sister by the bathroom. He looked at me like he didn't know me anymore. For the first time, I felt a flicker of real empathy for my sister. She'd been shaped by the same dysfunctional family dynamics that had hurt me just from the opposite side of the equation. Being the golden child came with its own pressures and distortions. Where is Robert now? I asked. At the hotel, she replied miserably. We had our first fight as a married couple last night instead of she trailed off, not needing to complete the thought. He said he needed time to think about what kind of family he married into on our wedding night. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of decades of unhealthy family patterns hanging between us. Finally, Emily looked up, really seeing me perhaps for the first time. Why didn't you ever say anything? She asked about how you felt. All these years. I considered my answer carefully. I did in small ways, but whenever I expressed hurt or disappointment, I was told I was being oversensitive or dramatic. Eventually, you stopped trying. I never realized, she began, then stopped. No, that's not true. Sometimes I knew things weren't fair, but it was easier to go along with it, to accept being the favorite because it benefited me. Her admission, however, small felt monumental. Never before had any member of my family acknowledged the reality of our dynamic. Did you really put bathroom chair on the seating chart? I asked, needing to know the full truth. Emily flushed with shame. The wedding planner asked where to put you when we realized we were one table setting short. Mom suggested the chair by the restrooms since it was just Blanca. I didn't object. I even laughed when the planner wrote it that way on the chart as a joke. I never thought anyone but family would notice or care. Her honesty was both painful and oddly healing. The casual cruelty was exactly what I'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed removed any lingering self-doubt about whether I'd overreacted. I've spent my whole life trying to matter to our family, I said quietly. Yesterday just made it impossible to pretend anymore that I ever would. Emily was crying again, but differently now, less dramatically and more genuinely. I've been a terrible sister. I didn't contradict her. We both needed this moment of truth after a lifetime of pretense. Mom and Dad have been calling me nonstop, she continued. They want me to make you apologize for ruining the reception. They're rewriting history already, saying the chair was just temporary until dinner was over, that you were supposed to join their table later. That's not true, I stated firmly. No, Emily acknowledged. I told them I wouldn't ask you to apologize. That's why I came here instead of going to brunch with them and Robert's parents like we planned. I needed to see you. Myself to understand. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, our mother's name lighting up the screen. I ignored it as I had the dozens of calls and messages since last night. They're going to be furious that I came here, Emily said. Glancing at the phone, they told me not to contact you until you apologized first. I'm not going to apologize for leaving a situation where I was being publicly disrespected, I said calmly. Not to them, not to you, not to anyone. To my surprise, Emily nodded. I wouldn't either if I were you. She paused, fidgeting with her ruined dress. I don't know what happens now with us. I mean, it was a good question, one I hadn't fully processed myself. What did happen when you finally acknowledged the fundamental brokenness of your primary relationships? Where did you go from there? I don't know either, I admitted. But I do know I can't go back to how things were. I won't keep accepting scraps of consideration while giving everything. That part of our relationship is over. Emily nodded slowly, acceptance in her eyes despite the pain my words clearly caused her. Do you think we could ever have a real relationship like normal sisters? I don't know, I said honestly. That would require changes from everyone, not just you and me. Mom and Dad would need to acknowledge their role too. And I don't see that happening. Probably not, Emily agreed sadly. They're already constructing a narrative where you're the villain who abandoned my wedding out of jealousy. We sat in silence again, both processing the magnitude of what had happened and what it meant for our future. Finally, I stood up. You should go back to Robert, I said gently. He's probably worried about you showing up here in your wedding dress. Emily looked down at herself as if just remembering what she was wearing. God, I must look insane. She stood up, smoothing the wrinkled fabric futilely. What do I tell him about us? The truth, I suggested. That's probably the only way forward for any of us. As I walked her to the door, Emily turned to me one last time. I am sorry, Blanca, not just about the chair, but for everything, for never being the sister you deserved. For the first time since she arrived, I felt tears threaten my own composure. Thank you for saying that. After she left, I turned my phone off again and made a cup of coffee, trying to process everything that had just happened. The confrontation I dreaded had somehow become the most honest conversation I'd ever had with my sister. The future remained uncertain, but something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, the truth of our family dynamic had been spoken aloud rather than politely ignored. Whether anything would truly change remained to be seen. But I had changed, and that was enough for now. 6 months passed before I saw Emily again. In that time, much had changed for both of us. After our confrontation the morning after her wedding, I'd taken a step back from my family to focus on my own healing. The space and distance gave me clarity I'd never had while entangled in our dysfunctional patterns. I began seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics, working through the complex emotions of being the unfavored child. The validation from an objective professional was powerful, confirming that what I'd experienced wasn't normal or healthy. Despite my family's insistence that I was oversensitive, my parents' reaction to my departure from the wedding had been exactly as expected. There were angry calls, guilt-inducing texts, and eventually when those tactics failed, attempts to enlist mutual friends and relatives to intervene on their behalf. The consistent message was clear. I had been selfish and dramatic, ruining Emily's special day over something trivial. I maintained my boundaries firmly, but without animosity. I didn't argue or defend myself, simply stated that I needed space and would reach out when ready. This calm assertion of boundaries infuriated them more than any emotional outburst would have, as it denied them the familiar dynamic of me eventually capitulating to keep peace. Emily, to my surprise, respected my request for space. She sent a single text a week after our confrontation, taking time to think about everything. We'll be here when you're ready to talk. That simple acknowledgement of my needs without pressure or guilt was perhaps the most sisterly thing she'd ever done. In the months of distance, I built a life that wasn't centered around my family's approval. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected while prioritizing family obligations. I joined a book club and a hiking group, forming new friendships with people who appreciated me for who I was, not where I fit in a family hierarchy. I ended my relationship with Mark, recognizing it reflected the same pattern of giving without receiving that had defined my family relationships. His response to the breakup, indignant that I would prioritize my needs above his convenience, only confirmed I'd made Right decision. By the time Emily reached out, suggesting we meet for coffee, I felt stronger and more centered than I had in years. I was nervous about seeing her, but no longer feared the interaction would devastate me emotionally. We met at a neutral cafe halfway between our homes. Emily looked different, less polished than she typically appeared with her hair in a simple ponytail and minimal makeup. The changes weren't just physical. There was a humility in her demeanor I'd never seen before. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as we settled at a corner table with our drinks. "I wasn't sure you would. 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't have." I admitted I needed time to figure out what kind of relationship I'm willing to have going forward. Emily nodded, accepting this without defensiveness. "And have you figured that out?" "Partly," I said. "I know I won't go back to being the family doormat, always giving without receiving. I can't be the sister who drops everything when you need something, but gets seated by the bathroom at your wedding." She winced at the direct reference, but didn't try to minimize it. "That's fair, more than fair. How are things with Robert?" I asked, changing the subject slightly. Our last conversation had revealed tension in her new marriage following the wedding incident. Emily's expression grew complicated. "We're in counseling." The wedding situation made him see our family dynamics in a new light, and he had a lot of questions about whether I shared those values. It's been hard but necessary work. This surprised me. I'd always seen Robert as someone who would naturally fit into our family's hierarchy, another person who would center Emily's needs and wants. The fact that he'd challenged the treatment he witnessed spoke well of his character. "And Mom and Dad?" I asked, though I could guess the answer. Emily sighed. "They still insist you overreacted. They wanted me to use this meeting to convince you to apologize to them. And, will you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "No," she said firmly. "That's part of what Robert and I have been working on in counseling. Actually, setting boundaries with parents. It's not easy." The acknowledgement of our parents' role in our dysfunctional relationship was significant. For most of our lives, Emily had benefited from their favoritism while I suffered from their neglect, creating a division between us that had seemed insurmountable. "They're never going to change," I said, stating what we both knew. "They'll never admit they treated us differently, or that it was harmful." "Probably not," Emily agreed. "Dad stonewalled me for weeks when I refused to pressure you into apologizing. Mom still brings up the wedding incident as evidence of your instability. It's like they live in an alternate reality." We sat in companionable silence for a moment, united for perhaps the first time by our shared understanding of our parents' limitations. "I've been thinking a lot about why I went along with it for so long." Emily said eventually. "The favoritism. I mean, I knew it wasn't fair to you, even as a kid, but I never said anything. You were a child," I pointed out. "It wasn't your responsibility to correct our parents' behavior." "Maybe not when we were young," she conceded, "but I continued the pattern as an adult. I liked being the special one, the favorite. It was easier to maintain the status quo than question it, even when I could see it hurt you." Her self-awareness was unexpected and touching. "What changed?" I asked. "Honestly, seeing the look on Robert's face when he found out where you'd been seated. The absolute horror and disappointment. For the first time, I saw our family through outside eyes, and I was ashamed of what I saw." She continued, her voice softening. "And then, these past months, thinking about what kind of person I want to be. What kind of mother I might be someday. I don't want to continue these patterns. I don't want my future children competing for love or thinking their worth is based on being prettier or more talented than their siblings." The mention of future children surprised me. "Are you and Robert?" "Not yet," she clarified quickly. "But we're talking about it, and that makes all of this even more important to resolve. I don't want to bring children into these toxic patterns." We talked for nearly 3 hours that day, the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Emily shared her own struggles growing up as the favorite, the pressure to maintain perfection, the fear that love was conditional on achievement and appearance. I shared more about how the consistent dismissal of my feelings and needs had affected my self-worth and relationships. While our experiences had been vastly different, we found unexpected common ground in our determination to break the cycles we'd been raised in. Neither of us wanted to continue the patterns that had been modeled for us, albeit from different sides of the favoritism divide. At the end of our meeting, Emily asked hesitantly, "Do you think you could come to Thanksgiving next month? Robert and I are hosting instead of Mom and Dad. It would mean a lot to have you there." I considered the invitation carefully. "I can't promise anything yet. Let me think about it." She accepted this without pushing another sign of growth. "Take all the time you need. The invitation stands regardless." I did end up attending that Thanksgiving, my first family gathering since the wedding. It was uncomfortable at times, particularly with our parents, who maintained a polite fiction that nothing significant had happened, but there were good moments, too, particularly seeing the effort Emily made to include me in conversations and acknowledge my contributions to the meal. The most significant moment came after dinner when our mother made a passive-aggressive comment about my sensitivity regarding the wedding seating. Instead of letting it pass, as I would have before, or becoming defensive and emotional, I responded calmly, "Mom, I was put on a folding chair by the bathroom while distant relatives had proper seating. That's not sensitivity. That's a normal response to disrespect. I'm not interested in pretending it didn't happen or that my feelings weren't valid." The table fell silent. My mother looked stunned, unused to direct confrontation of her narratives. To my surprise, Emily spoke up. "Blanca's right, Mom. What happened at the wedding wasn't okay. I've apologized to her, and I think you and Dad should too." Our father immediately became defensive, but Robert, who had been quiet throughout most of the meal, intervened. "I think what Emily is trying to say is that acknowledgement of hurt feelings is important in families. Blanca felt excluded, and that's worth addressing rather than dismissing. My parents didn't apologize that day or any day since. Some people are simply incapable of acknowledging their role in causing pain, particularly when it threatens their self-image as good parents. But something fundamental shifted in our family dynamic nonetheless. I no longer sought their approval or acceptance. I no longer contorted myself to fit their expectations or swallowed hurt to maintain peace. I set clear boundaries about what treatment I would accept, and when those boundaries were crossed, I calmly removed myself from the situation. Emily and I have built a tentative new relationship over the past year, one based on mutual respect rather than the old patterns of her taking and me giving. It's not perfect, and we still sometimes fall into old habits, but we're both committed to creating something healthier than what we grew up with. The greatest lesson I've learned through all of this is that your self-worth isn't determined by how others treat you, even those who are supposed to love you unconditionally. Family should be a source of support and acceptance, but when it isn't, you have both the right and responsibility to create boundaries that protect your well-being. Walking out of that wedding was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but also one of the most necessary. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to remove yourself from situations where your humanity isn't respected, and sometimes paradoxically, that act of self-respect creates the possibility for more authentic relationships to develop. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my family. Some wounds may never fully heal, and some patterns may be too deeply ingrained to completely overcome. But I do know that I'll never again accept a folding chair by the bathroom, literally or figuratively, in any relationship. Have you ever had to walk away from a family situation to protect your self-worth? What boundaries have you created in your own family relationships? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Remember that you deserve to be valued not just for what you give to others, but simply for who you are. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to honor your own worth in all relationships